She arrived in that seaside village wanting to rest, pretend everything was fine, and spend a month with the best friend she hadn't seen in 5 years. The problem? He was no longer exactly the boy she remembered, and one unexpectedly awkward reunion was enough for both of them to realize that maybe their friendship was changing into something more. The taxi van slowed at the bend in the road, right where the asphalt gave up trying to stay smooth, and the sand started winning, grain by grain. Ellie Brooks pressed her forehead to the window. The driver was humming a song she half recognized from when she was 9 years old, and that small detail nearly undid her. She had cried twice on the plane, once during takeoff, once when the coastline appeared under the wing, that long thin line of palm trees and white sand that always looked from above like a smile resting on its side. Now the van was easing past the bakery with the green awning, past the church with the leaning fence, past Mr. Henderson's old store with the cat that slept on top of the freezer. Everything was where she had left it. 5 years had touched almost nothing in Pelican Point, Florida. She, on the other hand, was held together by paperwork and pride. Right here, miss. Right here. The Pelican Point Inn looked the same and not the same. The white shutters were freshly painted. The hibiscus by the gate had thickened into a hedge. The wooden sign her grandfather had carved still hung over the porch, repainted in clean blue letters. She paid the driver, dragged her 2 suitcases onto the front path, and stood for a moment, just listening. Gulls. Far off, the sea. A wind chime someone had hung from the porch beam, made of small shells, clicking the way little shells click, patient, uneven, like an old woman counting beads. She took one breath and let it out slow. The lie she had decided to keep stayed put. Nobody here would know she had been let go from her job. Nobody would know she had no real plan past this month. She had come for a vacation, just a vacation. That was the story, and she would hold it together with both hands. Ellie Bug? The voice came from behind her, from the side garden where the pool was. A voice she would know in a stadium of strangers. She turned, smile already lifting, and the smile froze halfway. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. Caleb Whitmore was crossing the path toward her, towel slung over his shoulders, hair still dripping onto the brick path. She had seen him on a screen 100 times. She had seen his face leaner, the boy gone out of it, the shoulders broader in photos. None of that had prepared her for the man in front of her. He looked taller, broader, and completely different from the boy she remembered. She felt her mouth open. She felt it stay open. She did not for 3 full seconds remember the word hi. He had been laughing as he came around the corner. The laugh slipped, very slightly, when he actually saw her standing there in her travel jeans and her wrinkled white shirt. Brown hair pulled into a soft knot that the flight had loosened further. He cleared his throat, like a man who had just walked into the wrong room and was deciding whether to leave. Then he came at her anyway. "You," he said. "Cal." He caught her against him, and one of her suitcases tipped over with a small protest. Her arms went around his neck the way they had always gone around his neck, since they were 8 and he was carrying her on his back across the dunes. He lifted her in a giant hug, the way he always used to before her brain could even process it. 5 years dissolved. The years before that came flooding back. He smelled like chlorine and like the same plain soap his grandmother had been buying for years, except everything felt different now that they were adults. And her cheek was pressed to a shoulder that was somehow sturdy and steady, in a way she did not remember sturdy and steady being. He held her a beat longer than maybe he meant to. She held him a beat longer than maybe she meant to. Walter, the front desk man who had been working that lobby since before either of them learned to write their names, stepped out onto the porch with a stack of folded towels, took one look at the scene, and coughed into his sleeve. The cough was discreet, professional, almost theatrical. They unwound like 2 people caught reading each other's mail. "You're heavier," Caleb said. "You're rude. Heavier in a good way. Stop talking." He laughed, and the laugh was the same. She held on to that. The laugh, at least, she still knew. He bent to pick up her tipped suitcase. She bent at the same time, and their foreheads almost knocked together. He caught her shoulder to steady her, and that was the moment her heart did the thing. The small betraying thing. "Good to have you home, Miss Brooks," Walter said, sliding a room key across the polished oak counter without anyone having asked. He did not look up. He had not, in 20 years, looked up at anyone who came through the front door. He did not need to. He had heard the suitcase wheels on the path and made his guess and been correct. Ellie laughed for the first time since she had stepped off the plane. A real laugh, surprised out of her. "Walter." "Hi?" "Mm-hmm. You haven't aged a day." "I age inside. It's cheaper." Caleb had her larger suitcase under one arm like it weighed nothing, and he was already halfway to the elevator. He pressed the button without looking at the panel because his thumb knew where to land. The doors opened with the same small sigh they had been making since 1998. "Top floor," he said. "I know which floor, Cal. Reminding you." The elevator smelled like lemon polish and a little bit of salt water and a touch of the lavender his grandmother kept tucked behind the elevator buttons in a small linen sachet, the way she had always kept lavender there, because she swore guests stayed calmer when they could not name the reason. Ellie had grown up in this elevator. She had grown up in this lobby. She had grown up climbing onto Walter's wheeled office chair and scooting around behind the counter and getting scolded for it in a soft voice that did not really mean it. The doors opened on the 4th floor. He led her to the end of the hall, past 2 closed doors, to the wide one with the small brass plate that just said, "Whitmore." He pushed it open with his shoulder and stepped back. The suite was a small apartment, really. A living room that opened onto a balcony, where the sea cut a flat blue line across the railing. A kitchen lived in with a coffee pot that had clearly been used that morning. 2 bedrooms, a bookshelf with the kind of books a person actually reads, paperbacks with broken spines, not ornaments. She set her hand on the back of the couch and just looked. "You live here," she said quietly. "I live here. That bookshelf was your grandmother's." She gave up reading mysteries. Said she's tired of guessing the killer in the first 10 pages. Ellie smiled at the floor. She wanted to cry again and would not let herself. He carried her bags into the main bedroom. She followed and immediately backed out. "Not that room. It's the bigger one. You sleep there. For a month I won't. Cal. Ellie." He had set the suitcase down on the bed and was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, towel still around his neck, that small, stubborn line between his eyebrows that she remembered from every argument they had ever had since the year they were 12 and disagreed about whether a horseshoe crab was a real crab. She tapped his shoulder to push him out of the doorway. "The guest room," she said firmly, picking up her own suitcase. "End of discussion." Stubborn. Practiced. He let it go. He always let it go when she got that little crease in her forehead. He always had. He picked up her bag anyway, because she was not allowed to carry her own bag inside his building. And that was a rule older than either of them. The guest room had its own small window onto the same balcony. White curtains. A bed with a quilt his grandmother had made 40 years ago. A nightstand with one small lamp. It was perfect, and she did not say so. That night, after a shower and a plate of pasta she did not really taste, she ended up on his couch, wrapped in a warm blanket because the air conditioning was running and the night was chilly. They sat close, just enjoying the quiet company. It was, after 5 years, completely natural. They talked. About nothing. About everything. About the bakery owner's daughter who had finally married the mechanic. About the church choir that had lost 3 singers and gained a goat through circumstances no one would explain. About a hurricane 2 years ago that took half the dock and gave it back the next day, broken in a different way. She laughed until her stomach hurt at his description of an English bachelor party that had once tried to check in dressed as pirates. At some point he reached down to adjust the throw blanket over her feet without looking, the way you adjust a thing you do not want to disturb. He did not look at her, but he had leaned closer to do it, and in that small motion he caught a breath of her hair, sun-warmed, salt-touched with whatever soap she had brought from the city, and he forgot, for 1 full second, what he had been about to say next. His grandmother had warned him about a lot of things in his life. She had not warned him about that. The coffee was already on when she came out of the guest room, barefoot, hair still damp from a shower she had taken at 5 in the morning because she was incapable of sleeping past 5 in the morning in a house near the sea. The smell hit her first. Coffee, toasted bread, a faint trace of orange peel from the marmalade his grandmother sent down in jars every Sunday. He was at the kitchen table in a soft grey shirt, reading a printed sheet covered in pencil marks. He had glasses on. She had not known he wore glasses now. She did not say anything about it. She filed the detail away for later, the way she filed all the things she was not allowed to talk about. "You're up," he said without looking. "You're wearing glasses." "I'm not." "You are." He pushed them up his nose and continued to not look at her. "Reading glasses. Only for tiny letters. Very rarely. Almost never." She poured a cup of coffee, sat down across from him, and pulled the sheet across the table to read it. Booking schedules. 2 arrivals at noon, 3 at 4, a wedding party of 14 on Friday. The pencil marks were his. She would know that lefty slant in any handwriting in the country. She tapped the wedding party. "Where are they all sleeping?" 3 suites and a cottage. The bride wants the cottage. Brides always want the cottage. Brides always want the cottage. He turned the page over and went silent. She watched him for a long moment over the rim of her cup. The line of his jaw had set just slightly, the way it set when he was thinking about 10 things at once and pretending he was only thinking about one. She set her coffee down. "Caleb?" "Yes." "Let me help." "No." Wasn't a question. He looked up at her now. He had to. And when he did, he looked her full in the face for the first time that morning. The warm brown eyes, the small freckle near her left temple he had forgotten was there, the way her mouth tipped down on one side when she was being serious. And he forgot to fold the booking sheet, which was unlike him. "You came here to rest, Ellybug." "I'll rest behind a desk." "That isn't resting. That's resting for me." He set the pencil down very carefully. He had learned around age 10 that her mind did not change once it had set itself. He had also learned around age 11 that the fastest way to lose an argument with her was to keep arguing it. "It's high season," he said slowly, the way a man says something out loud so he can hear how bad an idea it is. "It would be a real job. The work isn't pretty." "I didn't come here for pretty." "Why are you really doing this?" She had not been ready for that question. He had a way of asking the small ones that landed like big ones with no warning, and her throat closed for a second around the truth she was not going to tell him. She steadied her voice. "Because if I don't help, I have to sit on that balcony all day, staring at the ocean and missing my best friend. And if I help, I get to spend the day with him." She lifted her cup again and set it to the inside of her cup, casual, like it cost her nothing. He went very still. He picked up his pencil again, examined it, put it back down. He had something at the corner of his mouth that he was trying to keep from doing. "Behind the desk," he said. "Mornings only. Mornings and afternoons. Mornings. Mornings and lunch service. You are exhausting. You started it." By 8 o'clock she was at the front desk in one of his grandmother's borrowed aprons, taking down phone messages in handwriting, Walter pronounced alarming but legible. By 9 she had charmed an elderly couple from Ohio into upgrading their room. By 10 she had reorganized the brochure rack by category instead of by color, which had been the great unsolved disagreement of the inn for 6 years. At 10:30, Doreen pushed through the swinging door from the kitchen, wiped her hands on the front of her apron, and put both fists on her hips like she had come out to settle something. "Look who's home." "Doreen." "Don't Doreen me. Come here." Ellie came around the desk and got pulled into a hug that smelled like sugar and butter, and the hot oven Doreen had clearly just left. "Skinny," Doreen said. "I'm not skinny. City made you skinny. We'll fix it. I'm doing crab cakes Thursday. You're eating too, don't argue." Doreen marched back toward the kitchen, then stopped at the door and pointed a wooden spoon over her shoulder. "By the way." "Yes?" "That boy hasn't smiled like that in 2 years." The door swung shut. Ellie stayed exactly where she was, very still, and pretended she had not heard. Behind her at the desk, Walter coughed. He coughed, she noticed, an awful lot. By 11 on Thursday night, the last of the day's noise had drained out of the inn. The poolside speakers were off. The string of small bulbs along the trellis had been clicked to their lowest setting, which was somewhere between candlelight and a memory. A door clicked shut on the second floor, then another, then nothing. Caleb was finishing the last of the paperwork at the bar by the pool. Ellie came down the side stairs in a pair of his grandmother's old sandals, wearing a simple swim cover-up over her swimsuit. Her hair was in a loose braid that had slid halfway over her shoulder, and she looked exhausted but peaceful under the low patio lights. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and just looked at the water. "You couldn't sleep either," she said. "I'm working." "You're stalling." He capped his pen, set it down across the receipts, and did not argue. The pool was lit from below, which made the water look bluer than the sea ever managed. A small breeze was moving the leaves of the potted palm at the far corner. The shells on the porch chime upstairs were still clicking, faintly, like somebody 2 streets over was trying to whisper. She slipped the shirt off over the back of a deck chair. She did not look at him while she did it. She did not need to. She could feel him not looking very precisely, the way you can feel a person not looking when they are absolutely looking. She went down the steps into the shallow end. He took longer than he needed to fold the receipts. Then he took off his own shirt, walked to the deep end, and went in cleanly, the way he had been going into that water since he was 9 years old. They swam toward each other without meaning to, and stopped about 4 feet apart in the middle. "It's quiet," she said. "It is." "I forgot it could be this quiet." "You forgot a lot of things." She tilted her head. "What does that mean?" "Just talking." It was not just talking. They both knew it was not just talking. But she let it pass because she did not yet know what to do with the thing in his face when he had said it, and he let it pass because he did not yet know what to do with his own mouth for saying it out loud. She slipped under the surface, came back up, and pushed wet hair out of her eyes. He was still looking at her. He had not moved. He opened his mouth. He almost said something. She watched him almost say it. She watched him close his mouth again and decide not to. She felt her face go warm in a way the water did not explain. She ducked under again, hoping to come up with a different face. The water muffled the world for the 4 seconds she was beneath it, and in those 4 seconds her own thoughts went very loud. "Look away first," she told herself. "Be the one who looks away first." She came up. He still had not looked away. "You're going to get a crick in your neck," she said, splashing him lightly. "Worth it." She did not have an answer ready for that one. The word had landed too plainly for the way he had said it. Flat, easy, with no joke around the edges to soften it. He realized half a second later that he had not put a joke around the edges. He looked down at the water. He cleared his throat. He started swimming a slow, lazy circle around her, like a man who had been busted and was trying to walk it off. She turned where she stood, watching him circle, and the smile that pulled at her mouth was a smile she did not give him the satisfaction of seeing fully. She pressed her lips together. "Caleb. You're not subtle." "Never claimed to be subtle, Ellybug." "You used to claim it." "I outgrew it." He pushed off the wall and came up next to her, close enough that the small ripple of his motion touched the underside of her arms. He did not touch her. He stayed at a polite, terrible distance. "Get out before you turn into a raisin," he said. "You first." "Fine." He did not move. Neither did she. The string lights flickered once, the way the inn's old wiring sometimes did right before a storm somewhere far away. It was Walter, of course, who saved them. Walter, walking past the pool gate with a roll of paper towels under one arm because the night clerk had spilled coffee on the lobby rug. Walter, who did not look at them at all this time. Walter, who only said, "Don't drown," with the deep neutrality of a man who had seen everything and intended to comment on none of it. They got out. They went up to the suite. She slept badly. He did not sleep at all. The recipe card was on the kitchen counter, brown at the edges, the handwriting faded almost to a pencil ghost. Margaret Whitmore, crab stew, the right way. Ellie had asked Nana Maggie for it after breakfast, just to have it in her hand again, just to read it in that careful, slanted writing that always crossed its sevens. She had not meant to actually cook it. By 2 in the afternoon, she had cooked it anyway. She had walked to the market for the claw meat Doreen swore was the only acceptable kind. She had cut the onion at the small board his grandmother used to sit at, and she had cried twice, once at the onion and once for no good reason. She had let the broth go slow. The kitchen had filled with the smell. Salt, sweet butter, a low warmth of paprika and bay leaf. and the smell had moved out into the living room and out under the suite door into the hallway, where 3 flights down, Caleb stepped out of the office and lifted his head like a man who had heard his own name called from a long way off. He did not say anything when he came in. He just stopped inside the door. She was at the stove with her sleeves pushed up. A streak of flour was across one cheekbone, where she had wiped at it without thinking. The braid was back, looser than yesterday. There was a wooden spoon in her hand. He stood at the doorway a beat longer than he needed to. "That," he said, "is a recipe I have not smelled in 5 years." "I asked your grandmother." "You asked my grandmother for the family stew recipe." "She gave it freely." "My grandmother has refused to give that recipe to 2 paying restaurants and one of my actual cousins." Ellie kept stirring, not looking at him, mouth tucked at the corner. "I'm very charming." "You are very something." She lifted the spoon out of the pot, blew on it once, and turned to face him. "Come here. Tell me if it's right." He came. He had no reason to come quickly. He came quickly anyway. She held the wooden spoon up between them. A little broth pooled in the bowl of it, steam rising off in a thin, pale line that wandered up between her face and his. He bent forward to taste because she was a head shorter than he was, and there was a small, careful inch of space that he did not cross. He closed his mouth around the spoon. He did not close his eyes. He kept them on hers. He had her brown eyes lit by the kitchen light, that warm, soft brown, the color of strong tea, and for one long second neither of them remembered to look away. The steam stayed between them. The stew clicked quietly behind her on the burner. Somewhere downstairs a door shut. Somewhere far off a bicycle bell rang twice. He swallowed. She did not move the spoon. "Well," she said. He did not answer right away. "It's perfect," he said finally. His voice was low. She had heard him say words 1,000 times. She had not heard him say a word in that voice before. She looked down at the spoon between them. She looked up again. He was not looking at the pot. "You're not talking about the stew," she said. It came out as a half-laugh because she did not know what else to do with it. "I am talking," he said carefully, "about the stew. Caleb. Ellie bug." He stepped back. He had to. He pressed the heel of one hand against the kitchen counter behind him, like a man steadying a chair that was not actually wobbling, and let out a small breath that did not sound like a man caught off guard, because he was a man who did not get caught off guard, and she did not believe him for a second. She turned back to the stove. She turned the heat down. She did not need to turn the heat down. She needed her hands to be doing something. "You ruined my apron," he said behind her. "I borrowed your apron. You ruined it with flour. I rescued it from a sad existence." He laughed quiet, and the laugh came back to normal, and the kitchen came back to normal, and the floor under her feet decided to be a floor again. They ate at the small table by the window. He had 2 bowls. He did not say it was as good as his grandmother's, because he was not a man who would lie about that, and also because he had decided, somewhere between the first bite and the second, that it was actually better, and he was not yet brave enough to say that out loud. She caught him watching her over the rim of his glass. He caught her catching him. Neither of them looked away. It was Walter, downstairs at the front desk, who picked up the phone exactly then and called up to the suite to say a guest was asking about kayak rentals. It was, Ellie thought, as she set down her spoon, beginning to feel like Walter was protecting them on purpose. The taxi that brought Sienna Hale to the Pelican Point Inn pulled up at exactly 4 in the afternoon, the way she had said it would on the phone. She stepped out wearing a pale linen dress and a wide straw hat, and she paid the driver before he had finished unloading her bags, which were many, and were the kind of bags that came with brass plates. She walked across the front porch the way a woman walks across a front porch when she has been told, quite often in her life, that she walks well. Walter looked up from the desk computer. He did not stand. Walter never stood for anyone who had not been arriving at his desk since the previous century. "Welcome, Miss Hale. And you must be Walter. Caleb has told me about you." Walter did not blink. "He has not, ma'am." Sienna laughed as if he had told a joke. He had not told a joke. Ellie, who was bent down behind the counter putting away a stack of folded brochures, did not raise her head. She filed the laugh away in a small private folder labeled, "We will see." Caleb came down the side stairs 2 minutes later, because Walter, having pressed the office buzzer twice for emphasis, had given him no choice. He was in his usual work clothes, clean shirt, dark jeans, sleeves shoved up to the forearms, and he was wearing a faint frown of a man who knew exactly which guest had just checked in. "Miss Hale, welcome." "Caleb." She said his name like a sip of something. "It is so good to finally meet the man behind the emails. I hope your room is to your liking. I haven't seen it yet, you'll have to walk me up. Walter will be more than glad to." Walter, who had not at any point indicated gladness, slid a key across the counter and said, "Suite 6. Up the stairs. Second on the left, can't miss it, ma'am. Have a lovely stay." He said it in one breath. Sienna took the key without taking her eyes off Caleb. "Maybe drinks later. To welcome me properly. The bar opens at 6. "That isn't what I meant. It's what we offer." He gave her the small professional nod that was the same nod he gave to every guest. It cost him nothing. It told her nothing. She accepted it because she had to accept it, and she went off toward the stairs with the kind of slow walk that is intended for people who are watching. Ellie stood up behind the counter. She did not look at Caleb. She set the stack of brochures down rather firmly. She picked up a pen, located a stray sticky note, and wrote, "Call back about Tuesday," in handwriting that had a small, angry slant to it. She put the pen down. She picked it up. She put it down again. "You're going to wear a hole in the desk," Caleb said carefully. "I am working. You are doing something. I'm reorganizing. You reorganized yesterday. Then I'm unreorganizing." He leaned one elbow on the counter and tipped his head slightly to try to catch her eye. She kept her face turned to the cubbies. "Ellie Bug." "Are you all right?" She finally looked at him. Brown eyes, dead level, calm as a flat sea. The calm of a flat sea was the most dangerous calm there was, and he knew it, because he had grown up reading that water. "There are inconvenient guests, Cal. That's all." "Inconvenient how?" "Inconvenient, generally." He looked at her for one more careful second, and then a slow grin broke across his face. The lopsided one, the one he had used on her since they were 8, the one that meant he had her figured out and was not going to be polite about it. "Ellie, don't. Are you jealous?" "I am not. You are jealous. I am annoyed. There is a difference. You are jealous on my behalf as my best friend. That is very sweet of you. I am not. It happens. I'm an irresistible man. People get attached." She stared at him. "Your ego," she said slowly, "is the size of this entire building. It's a big building, Ellie Bug." "It is." He laughed. He had the grace, at least, to laugh quietly, because Walter was still 6 feet away pretending to read a fax. Then he reached across the counter, picked up the sticky note she had written, read it, set it back down, and tapped it once with his finger. "Tuesday isn't for 2 weeks," he said. "I am planning ahead." "You are flustered." She turned bright red. He had the audacity to look pleased about it. The corner of his mouth did the small thing it did when he was very, very happy and was attempting with limited success to appear unmoved. He pushed off the counter. "I'll be in the back office." "Fine. Try not to break any furniture. I make no promises." He walked away. She watched him walk away. She did not realize she was watching him walk away until Walter cleared his throat. She did not look at Walter. She did not need to. Walter, mercifully, did not say a word. The wind shifted on Saturday morning. It came in flat and damp off the water, the way it always did before 3 days of heavy weather, and it carried with it the smell of wet sand and bruised seaweed, and the lower, greener smell of rain that had not yet decided to fall. The shutters on the second floor began their small, unhappy tapping. The wind chime on the porch lost its rhythm and clattered like a dropped tray. A guest stepped out onto her balcony, took one look at the sky, and stepped back inside. Ellie woke with her throat on fire and her head full of cotton. She did not call it a fever. She called it a little tired. She had been raised by her mother to call any illness short of pneumonia. A little tired, and old habits did not let go just because a person had moved to the city and back. She pulled herself out of bed, drank a glass of water at the bathroom sink, and stared at her own face in the mirror. Her eyes looked like she had been crying. She had not been crying. She splashed water on her face and went downstairs. Caleb was already at the kitchen table with the morning paper folded the way he always folded it, once down the middle, once across, his coffee mug set on the corner that did not have headlines on it. He looked up when she came in. He stopped looking down again. "Sit," he said. "I'm fine." "Sit, Ellie." She sat. He reached across the table without touching her face, without quite, and just hovered the back of his hand near her cheek for a second. Then he set the hand back down. He took a long, careful breath. "You're burning up." "I'm not." "You're sick." "I have a tiny scratch in my throat, Cal. I'm working today." "You are not." "Don't be ridiculous." "Doreen." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The swinging kitchen door pushed open about 2 seconds later, because Doreen had been listening to every word and pretending not to. She came around the table with a wooden spoon already in her hand, the way other people came around tables holding badges. "Up," Doreen said. "Doreen, I'm fine." "You sound like a frog who took up smoking. Up." "Honestly, Up." Ellie stood. There was no arguing with Doreen when she had the spoon. Even Walter avoided arguing with Doreen when she had the spoon, and Walter argued with everyone. Caleb walked her back upstairs himself. He carried her water glass. He opened the door of her room for her. He did not allow her to take a single book off the shelf for distraction, because he said, with a small grim line at the corner of his mouth, that she was going to sleep, and that was the whole job. She protested into the pillow. He pulled the curtain. She lasted 3 minutes, maybe 4, before her eyes closed without her permission. When she opened them again, the light in the room had gone grey. The wind had picked up. Somewhere out beyond the balcony, the rain had finally decided. It came in long, soft, easy sheets, the kind of rain that meant business but did not feel like punishment. Caleb was on the edge of her bed, slowly setting a damp cloth across her forehead. She did not move. He was looking down at his own hand, frowning slightly, the way a man frowns when he is concentrating on a thing he has not done in a long time. She could not see his eyes from that angle. She could only see the line of his jaw, and the way the corner of his mouth pressed down with a focus she had not seen on him since they were children, fixing a broken kite together. The cloth was cool. The cloth was, she realized, exactly the right amount of cool. She closed her eyes again so he would not know she was awake. She was not sure why. She only knew that if he looked at her right then, she was going to do something she could not take back, like cry. He did not notice. He moved very quietly. He left. 20 minutes later, the smell of broth came up the hall. He came back with a tray. Chicken broth, simple, the way Doreen made it on weather days, with a small dish of crackers and 1 slice of lemon. He set the tray on the nightstand. He helped her sit up against the pillows the way you help a very small child sit up. 1 hand at her shoulder, 1 tucking the pillow behind her, with a slow concentration that was, somehow, the most careful she had been touched in years. "I can do it," she said. "I know." "Then let me." "I know." He did not stop. He stirred the broth once with the small spoon. He let her hold the mug herself, because he had not, in the entire history of their friendship, ever attempted to feed her with a spoon while she could lift her own arm. He sat on the edge of the chair across from the bed and watched her sip. He looked tired. She had not seen him look tired in a week. "You don't have to stay," she said. "I know." "I mean it, Cal. Go work." "Drink your soup." She drank her soup. She finished half. She set the mug down on the tray. Her eyelids were doing the slow, heavy thing again. She wanted to argue about him going back to work, and she could not seem to find the energy to start the first sentence. She woke up again much later. The rain had not stopped. It was thicker now, steady, drumming on the wide overhang above her window. The lamp on the nightstand was on but turned to its lowest setting. The cloth on her forehead had been replaced at some point with a fresh one. The tray was gone. The room smelled faintly of lemon and salt, and the dry pine of the old quilt across her knees. The armchair across the room was occupied. Caleb was in it. He was not asleep. He was not reading. He was not on his phone. He had his elbows on his knees and his hands loosely clasped between them, and he was looking at her face, the way a man looks at something he has been entrusted with, quietly, steadily, with the kind of attention that does not require an audience. The clock by her bed said 3:22 in the morning. He had been in that chair for hours, Her chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with being sick. It was a small, slow, unfamiliar pull, low and to the left, and she did not have a name for it yet, but she understood with a clarity that surprised her that she was going to have to find a name for it before this month was over. He realized she was awake. He did not move. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi. Go back to sleep." "You're not sleeping." "I'm fine." "Caleb." "Ellybug, go back to sleep." She closed her eyes. She kept them closed. She did not go back to sleep right away. She lay very still and listened to the rain, and she listened to him not move, and she felt the quilt his grandmother had made 40 years ago resting across her legs, and she felt, for the first time in a very long time, completely safe. She drifted off. He stayed in the chair until the first grey of morning, and then only then he let himself rest his head back against the wall. He did not sleep. He just kept watch. In the dream, the water was the wrong colour. It was the deep, flat green of a pond that had not moved in a long time, and her feet were not touching anything. She was 9 years old in the dream, the way she was always 9 in this particular dream, and the shape was below her again. The long, slow grey shape, the one with no eyes she could see, the one that always came up from underneath without making any sound at all. She woke up grabbing the edge of the quilt with both hands. The room was dark. The rain was gone. The clock by the bed said 2:41 in the morning. She lay there for a long second trying to slow her heart. She told herself she was 28 years old. She told herself she was in Pelican Point. She told herself there was a wooden floor under her bed, and below that floor there were 3 more floors. And below those floors there was a porch and a flower bed and a paved street and a lot of solid earth, and that no shark in the history of sharks had ever appeared inside a house. Her heart did not listen. It had not listened since she was 9. She slid out of bed barefoot. The wooden boards were cool. She did not stop to put on a robe, because if she stopped to put on a robe she would lose her nerve and go back under the quilt and lie awake until dawn, pretending she was a grown woman, and she was tired of pretending. She crossed the small living room of the suite. She paused in front of his door, which was always left ajar by an inch because his grandmother had drilled into him as a child that doors should never be fully shut on family. She put her fingertips against the wood and pushed it open another inch. "Cal!" It came out small, smaller than she had meant. There was a long, careful pause. Then his voice, low and clear, completely awake. "Ellybug." I had the dream. The shark. The shark. She could not see his face from the doorway. She could see only the long line of him under the sheet, on his back, with one arm tucked behind his head. She heard him let out a quiet breath. She could not tell if he was laughing or not. She could feel with the long, unfair instinct of a person who had known him since the age of 7 that he was trying very hard not to laugh, because he loved her too much to laugh, and also because the idea that a grown woman could be undone by a long grey shape in green water was, to a man who had spent his whole life on the coast, slightly funny. The corner of his mouth moved. "Come here. Don't laugh. I'm not laughing. You are about to laugh. I am 100% not." She came around the side of the bed in 3 small steps. She stopped at the edge. He lifted the sheet without saying anything else and just held it open. He did not move to make room. He did not need to. He had a bed wide enough for 2 people, and a habit of sleeping on the very edge of it. The way men who live alone end up sleeping on the very edge of beds, as if the empty half were not theirs to take. She slid in. She kept her back to him at first. She did not know what else to do with her body. The thin cotton of her nightgown caught on the sheet for a second, and then settled. She pulled her knees up. She heard him let out a slow, steady breath. He set the sheet down across both of them, with a small, careful tug, the way he had once tucked her in on the porch swing during a thunderstorm when they were 11 years old. She could feel the line of his arm a foot behind her. He did not pull her in. He waited. She turned over. She tucked her head under his chin without quite looking at him, and she set her cheek flat against the soft cotton of his shirt over his heart, and the heart underneath it took one small, surprised beat that he did not manage to hide. He did not say anything about that. He just slid one arm slowly around her shoulders. His other hand came up and found the back of her head. and he started very gently to draw his fingers through her hair, the way you stroke a small animal that is afraid of nothing in particular and everything in general. He went slow. He did not say a word. Her hair smelled the way it always smelled, the way it had smelled in the kitchen, the way it had smelled when she had leaned past him in the elevator and her braid had brushed his shoulder. He had decided somewhere in the last 3 weeks that the scent of her hair was a thing he was no longer allowed to think about during business hours. It was not business hours. He let himself think about it. She let out a long breath against his collar. The breath had years of city in it. The breath had a job in it she had loved and lost. The breath had a long highway and a small apartment and the white quiet of a doctor's waiting room she had sat in last March, alone, when she had not been alone in her own head for months. He did not know any of those things. He did not need to know them yet. He felt her relax in small stages, first her shoulders, then her hands, which she had been holding in a small, tight knot at the front of his shirt, then the long line of her back. He kept moving his fingers through her hair. He could have kept moving his fingers through her hair until the sun came up. He probably would. "Caleb," she murmured. Thank you. Don't. For not laughing. I am still very close to laughing. You said you were not. I lied." She let out a small sound against his shoulder that was almost a laugh and not quite, and then she was asleep. Just like that. The way a child falls asleep when a danger has gone away. The way a person falls asleep when they have not in years allowed themselves to fall asleep without listening for something. He lay very still after that. He did not want to move. He did not want to wake her. He did not, if he was honest with himself in the dark, want this night to end. He had been a careful man his whole life. He had been a man who ran a business and looked at numbers, and stood at the front desk shaking the hands of strangers, and never let his face show anything that was not exactly what he had decided to show. He had built that habit so carefully, he had forgotten where the seams were. The seams, it turned out, were here. The seams were her cheek on his shirt, and her hand fisted in the cotton over his ribs, and a tangle of brown hair across his arm, and the small, ordinary weight of a woman he had known since she was a kid, who could not pronounce her own last name. He closed his eyes. He listened to her breathe. He stayed awake another hour just to be sure she did not dream again. Then he too went under. The sun came up while they slept. Neither of them noticed. There was a small brown paper bag from the apothecary on Front Street, sitting on the entry table when Ellie came up to the suite that evening. The bag was tied with a piece of plain twine. The twine was the kind Mrs. Adler at the apothecary used because she had been using it since before plastic was invented, and she had no intention of changing now. Ellie did not pick it up. She walked past it to the kitchen because the bag was not hers, and the suite was not hers, and she was teaching herself, in small daily lessons, to keep both of those truths in her head at once. Caleb came out of the back office an hour later, in a clean white shirt and rolled-up sleeves, and the small distracted frown he wore when his head was still on the books. He saw the paper bag. He remembered the paper bag. He picked it up. "You," he said over his shoulder, "have to come tell me if this is a good idea." "What is it?" "A new cologne. Mrs. Adler picked it. She said I needed to update myself." Her words. Mrs. Adler used the word update. Mrs. Adler used the word update. Ellie laughed. She came around the kitchen island with her hands still damp from doing dishes she should not have been doing in the first place. She dried them on a cloth and held out a hand for the bottle. He did not give it to her. He had already opened the bag. He had already pulled out the small dark glass bottle and put a small pump of it against the side of his neck, the way you do when you do not entirely trust the salesperson and want a second opinion. He set the bottle down on the counter. "Come here," he said. "Tell me if it's terrible." She came closer. She stopped a step away from him. She tipped her chin up. He was, she had to admit again, the wrong height for this. He stood about a head taller than she did. To reach his neck, she would have had to push up onto her toes and lean in, and she did not particularly want to push up onto her toes in front of him at 6 in the evening while wearing his grandmother's borrowed apron. She made a small, frustrated sound. "You're tall." "I am." "Bend down." "No." "Caleb." "Why should I?" She started to come up onto her toes. He moved before she could finish the motion. He did not bend. He set both his hands at her waist and lifted her clean off the floor so she could reach. She let out a small startled sound, freezing in the air with her eyes very, very wide, her hands instinctively resting on his shoulders. He did not lower her right away, just smiling up at her. She stared down at him, her heart doing a dangerous flip at how easily he held her. "Caleb," she whispered. "Yes?" "You can put me down now." "I know I can. But you're not." "No, Ellie Bug, I am not." He had that look. The slow one. The one with no smile on the mouth and the whole smile in the eyes. She had been on the receiving end of that look perhaps 4 times in her life. She had never been on the receiving end of it from this angle, with his face this close, with her own arms looped behind his neck because they had nowhere else to go. She tapped him on the shoulder with the side of her hand. She could not manage a real slap. She could only manage the small, useless protest of a woman who was trying not to laugh and trying not to blush and failing at both. "You are a menace," she said. "Tell me about the cologne." That was a trick. "Tell me about the cologne." She gave up. She leaned in slowly until her cheek almost grazed the line of his jaw. She did not rush. She tipped her head a small fraction and let herself just breathe in. It smelled like cedar and salt, and something darker underneath that she could not place. It smelled like a man who had walked along a beach at the very end of the day and stopped at the bakery on the way home. It smelled, she realized, like him, only better, only the version of him that had been waiting to step forward. He had gone very still under her. She felt it more than she saw it. The line of his shoulders set. His hands at her back did not move. The whole of him was the held still of a man who had decided not to move. His other hand came up. It slid into her hair at the base of her neck, slow, with an intention she had not asked for and was not asking him to take back. He did not pull her in. He just set his hand there. The pressure of his fingers was steady. The pressure of his fingers said stay. She turned her face an inch, leaning in until her lips softly brushed his cheek right beside his jaw. He let out a quiet breath, his grip tightening just a fraction, as if he were trying to remember a reason to step back. But neither of them moved. The silence between them was thick, heavy with everything they weren't saying out loud. Somebody knocked on the suite door. 3 sharp, polite, completely unaware knocks. He set her down on her feet so fast she had to catch the edge of the counter. He turned away. He set both hands flat on the kitchen island. He took one long, careful breath. He did not look at her. "Coming," he called. His voice was the calm, professional voice he used for guests. It was a very good imitation of itself. She fixed her hair with both hands. She fixed the apron. She fixed her face. She was, she realized, the same color as a strawberry. She walked very purposefully toward the kitchen sink, as if she had been doing dishes the entire time. He went and opened the door. It was a hotel matter. It was a small hotel matter. Somebody had locked themselves out of a room and needed a spare key from the manager's set. He handled it with grace. He came back inside 2 minutes later. He shut the door. He leaned against it. He looked at her across the kitchen. Neither of them said a word. The pretending was going to be harder after this. They both knew it. Neither of them had any idea yet how much harder. There was a fly trapped against the lobby window the next morning. It had been there for about 10 minutes, drifting up and down the same 6 inches of glass, the way flies do when they cannot understand that the world is not, in fact, made of light. Walter watched it without comment. The brass bell over the front door rang. The fly continued its small, confused tour of the window. The man who walked in was tall, in a way that men who notice they are tall walk into a room. He had on a linen jacket that was a little too creased on purpose. He had on a watch that did not need to tell anyone the time. He was reading a folded brochure with what could only be described as a confident frown. "Welcome to the Pelican Point Inn, sir." "You must be Walter. Have I beat my booking?" "You have, sir, by an hour. Your room will be ready by 11. And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, sir, the porch is open, the coffee is hot, and the young lady at the desk will be glad to help you with anything else." The young lady at the desk did not look up. She was, at that particular moment, in the middle of a phone call about a wedding party's vegetarian options, and her pen was moving across a notepad with the focused authority of a court reporter. Her braid had slipped over one shoulder. Her sleeves were pushed up. She had a small smudge of pencil lead along the side of her hand. She did not, at any point in the next 40 seconds, register that a guest was now leaning one elbow on the corner of the desk and arranging his face into its most useful angle. She hung up the phone. She looked up. "Sorry about that. Welcome. Have you been helped?" "I have been very poorly helped," the man said pleasantly. "Walter here refuses to let me see my room. I think it is because he doesn't like the look of me." "Walter doesn't like the look of anyone, sir. Don't take it personally." The man laughed. The man took it as a compliment. He extended his hand across the desk. "Read." "Ellie." "Ellie," he said. He repeated the name slowly, as if tasting it. "I'm a real estate guy. From Boston. I'm down here scouting a property. You ever been to Boston?" "Once." "And? Too cold. You're a woman of strong opinions. I'm a woman with a phone in my ear most of the day. It's not the same thing." He laughed again. He had the kind of laugh that he had been told was charming and had begun to believe. He set both of his elbows on the desk now. He leaned in. "Let me take you to dinner," he said. "Tonight. Anywhere you want." She blinked. She had not expected the speed of it. She opened her mouth to say, "I'm sorry, I'm working here this month," and she got as far as the There was a step behind her. She did not hear it so much as she felt it, the long, deliberate, unhurried step of a man crossing his own lobby. Caleb came around the end of the desk and set himself calmly beside her. He did not look at her at all. He looked at the man at the counter, full on, with the easy professional face of an innkeeper who had been running this lobby since he was old enough to reach over it. The professional face was on. The eyes were not professional. "Sir," Caleb said pleasantly, "how can I help you?" "You can mind your business, friend. I was talking to the young lady." "The young lady," Caleb said, still pleasantly, "is my girlfriend." The lobby went very quiet. The fly stopped moving. Walter mercifully did not look up. Ellie felt the entire blood supply of her body relocate to her face. She kept her chin up. She did not, by any visible motion, react. She was a professional. She was a professional. Reed from Boston looked at Caleb. He looked at Ellie. He looked at the small smudge of pencil along her hand. He looked back at Caleb. Caleb had not moved. "Apologies," Reed said, after a long second. "Not necessary, sir." "My mistake." "Easy mistake. Could I get a coffee?" "On the side porch. Cream and sugar on the table." Reed retreated to the porch. He moved well. He was a man who knew how to leave a room he had lost. Caleb stayed at the counter for one more beat. He turned his head an inch. He did not look at Ellie. He looked at Walter. "I'll be in the back office." "Mm-hmm." He left. He did not look at her at all. Ellie stood very still behind the counter. She set her pen down with the kind of careful precision a person uses when they are trying very hard not to throw it. Her hand was not quite steady. She tucked it into the pocket of her apron. She felt the back of her neck go warm, in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. She felt, more than anything else, the empty space he had left behind the counter when he had walked away without looking at her. Walter coughed. She did not look at Walter. "Don't," she said. "I wasn't going to. You were thinking it." "I do not, Miss Brooks, have thoughts. I have a schedule." "Walter." "Yes, Miss Brooks." "You are a terrible liar." "I have had practice." She went into the back office at noon. He was at the desk with a stack of vendor invoices spread out in front of him. He had not, by the look of it, signed any of them. He was holding a pen and not using it. She closed the door behind her. "Caleb?" "Yes." "What was that?" "That was me handling a guest." "That was you announcing to a stranger that I am your girlfriend." "I made a manager's decision." "You made a what?" He set the pen down. He did finally look at her. His face was even. His eyes were not. "He was bothering you." "He was a flirt. I can handle a flirt." "I know you can." "Then why?" "Because I do not, Ellie Bug, particularly want to watch you handle one." She stared at him. She did not know what to do with that sentence. She picked the only piece she could carry. "All right," she said slowly. "Fine. Then I get the same. The same. If you get to scare off men who hit on me, I get to do the same to women who hit on you. Done. You agreed to that fast. I have been agreeing to that for 2 weeks, Ellybug. You did not ask until now. She left the office without an answer. She had no answer. She did, however, have a plan. It involved a woman in a wide straw hat. It involved tonight. The laugh carried. It came up the side stairway from the lobby, the way sound carried up through that old stairwell on summer evenings, when the front doors were propped open with the brass dolphin doorstop, and the trade winds did the work the air conditioning was meant to do. It was Sienna's laugh, bright, long, performed for an audience that was, evidently, standing right in front of her. Ellie was on the balcony with a glass of iced tea she had not yet touched. The sky was the soft, used pink. It got about 40 minutes after the sun went down. The shells on the porch chime had begun their evening clatter. Somewhere a guest was tuning a guitar badly. Somewhere closer, Sienna was running her hand along Caleb's forearm at the front counter, and her laugh was sliding up the stairwell to make sure that everyone in the building knew it. Ellie set the glass down on the railing. "All right," she said to nobody. She did not run. She did not change. She did not check the mirror. She walked out of the suite in the same plain cotton sundress she had been wearing all day, with the hem just brushing her knees and the small enamel pin Doreen had given her on her left shoulder, and she took the side stairs 2 at a time, the way she had been taking them since she was 11. She slowed at the bottom step. She took 1 breath. She came around the corner into the lobby with her chin up. Caleb was, exactly as advertised, at the front counter. He was not, exactly as advertised, looking happy about it. His jaw was set in that small, careful line he used for problems he could not, by policy, raise his voice about. His arm was, in fact, the temporary residence of Sienna Hale's slow, pleased fingers. He was holding a clipboard with both hands, like a man holding a barrier. Sienna was leaning across the counter toward him. She had on the same wide straw hat as the day she'd arrived. She had on a different perfume tonight. The perfume was, Ellie noted with the small, uncharitable corner of her brain, absolutely fine. Caleb saw her come around the corner. His whole face changed. It was a small change. Anyone else would have missed it. The line of his shoulders went a half-inch less tense. The clipboard came down. The very corner of his mouth lifted. Ellie did not slow her step. She walked straight up to the counter, as if she had been crossing it her whole life. "There you are," she said, bright, loud enough to be heard. Cal. She had not, in all 28 years of her life, called him Cal in that exact tone before. He registered the tone in about half a second. He registered the plan in the second half-second. "Ellybug," he said smoothly, and he turned away from Sienna's hand without ceremony, the way a man turns toward the front door when his wife has come home. Sienna's fingers slid off his arm with no place to land. "I was just finishing with Miss Hale," Caleb said. "Were you looking for me, sweetheart?" "I was. You forgot the date." "The date. The date, Caleb." He blinked. He did not, evidently, have a date ready. He had been ready to be rescued. He had not been ready to be quizzed on the specifics of his own rescue. Ellie tilted her head at Sienna, with the small social smile she had been perfecting in city offices for 5 years. "It's our anniversary," she said. 5 years tonight." Caleb did not so much as twitch. 5 years tonight," he agreed. "You wouldn't believe how he forgets these things, Miss Hale. Every year. I have to remind him with breakfast." Sienna's face went through 3 weather systems in 2 seconds. Surprise. Polite disbelief. Then the long, careful, professional retreat of a woman who had been in this situation before and knew how it ended. "Of course," Sienna said. "Of course. I was just leaving." "Lovely meeting you," Ellie said. Sienna picked up her room key. Sienna left a small, cool thank you behind her on the counter. Sienna walked across the lobby with the same measured walk she had walked in with, only this one was a half-step quicker, and her hat, Ellie noticed with deep satisfaction, was on slightly crooked. The elevator dinged. The elevator doors closed. Ellie did not move for a full count of 3. She turned to Caleb. Caleb turned to Ellie. They held one careful beat of mutual professional faces. It snapped. He bent forward over the counter with one hand against his mouth. He was, she realized with a small, enormous joy, laughing. Silently, helplessly, with the small heaving shoulders of a man who had not laughed like that in possibly his entire adult life. She put both her hands flat on the counter and let her own laugh out, low at first because there were still guests on the porch, and then less low because Walter behind the desk had set his pen down and given them both a look that said, "Go on, then." She had to wipe at her eyes with the side of her thumb. He had to set the clipboard down because he could not, in his current state, hold it without dropping it. 5 years, Caleb wheezed. You said it was our anniversary. I did not. You said it was our anniversary. You agreed. You did not give me an alternative. I gave you a beautiful alternative, sweetheart. You called me Cal. You hate when people call you Cal. I do not hate when you call me Cal. She stopped laughing. She caught the small line of his mouth, the lifted corner, the way he was watching her now with that look she had been pretending all month she did not see. She caught it. She held it. She let it stand on the counter between them. He cleared his throat. He picked up the clipboard. 5 years, he murmured. 5 years. That's a lot of breakfast, Zellybug. It's a lot of forgetting. Maybe next time I won't forget. She looked at him. The lobby had gone very quiet around them. She did not have a clever answer. She did not, for once, want to find one. She just kept her eyes on his. Walter coughed professionally from the far end of the desk. She came around the corner of the counter, and she pressed the side of her hand against Caleb's arm, exactly where Sienna's hand had been, and she walked herself back up the side stairs without looking behind her once. She did not need to look. She knew he was watching her go. She had been turning the sentence over in her head for 3 weeks. I was let go from my job. She had tried it in shorter words. I was fired. She had tried it in longer words. There was a situation at work, and it ended with me being asked to leave. She had tried it without the verb at all, hoping the verb would just emerge of its own accord, and it had not. She was an editor by training. She knew that a sentence without a verb was not a sentence. She also knew that she had been carrying that particular non-sentence around like a stone in her shoe since the first night she had stepped off the plane. The suite was quiet at 10:38 in the evening. Caleb was at the small writing desk by the balcony door with the books open and a yellow pencil tucked behind one ear. He was not actually working. He had been not actually working for about 20 minutes. He had been writing the same number into the same column 3 times, and the column did not need it. She was on the couch with her legs folded under her and the small needlepoint pillow his grandmother had made 40 years ago pressed against her stomach. The pillow had ducks on it. The ducks were not very good ducks. They had been embroidered, his grandmother had once told her, while watching a movie that turned out to be a bad movie. She held the ducks. She breathed in once. Caleb. I have to tell you something. He set the pencil down. He did not turn around right away. He sat for one careful second with his hand flat on the page, and then he closed the ledger and got up and crossed the room and sat down on the couch beside her. He did not sit too close. He left the small needlepoint pillow between them. He looked at her face, and then he looked at her hands on the pillow, and then he looked at her face again, and he waited. She did not know where to start. She started badly. I wasn't on vacation, he nodded once. He did not interrupt. He did not say, I know. He did not say, go on. He just nodded. There was a girl at work, a colleague. She wanted what I had, the accounts, the corner desk by the window. The boss liked me. She told him things that weren't true. She told them well. She told them for months. I never saw it coming until the meeting on a Tuesday at 3 in the afternoon when they walked me out of the building. Her voice was very even. She was almost proud of how even her voice was. I had 2 weeks of severance. I had no plan. I had this awful apartment over a noisy street and a refrigerator that mostly contained mustard. And one morning I sat on the floor of that apartment and I realized I wanted to come home. I wanted to come here. And then I thought about telling you, and I couldn't. I didn't want you to see me like that. I didn't want you to know I'd failed. She set the pillow down. She set it carefully in her lap. She still could not look at him. So I came, she said, and I pretended, and I'm sorry. The room was very quiet. She could hear the small mechanical hum of the refrigerator down the kitchen hall. She could hear a single shutter tapping somewhere on the second floor. She could hear, very far off, somebody on the porch laughing at something that was not, she felt sure, very funny. She did not look up. She could not look up. His hand moved. It came across the small space between them, slow, and it slid under her hand on the duck's palm up, the way a man offers his hand to help a person up off a curb. He did not grab. He did not pull. He just offered. She put her hand into his. He closed his fingers. "Ellybug, don't! Look at me." She looked at him. His face was very still. It was not the inn manager's face. It was not even the careful boy-grown-up face she had been watching all month. It was something underneath both of those, something older, something that had been there since they were 7 and 8. And he had taken her hand to walk her past the neighbor's loose dog. "You did not fail," he said. "I did. You were betrayed. That is not the same. It feels the same. It is not." He kept his eyes on hers. "I have wanted to ask you something," he said, "for about 2 years." "What?" "I have needed a manager." She did not move. "A real one," he said, "not a glorified assistant, not a person who answers the phones. A manager. Someone who can run this place when I am not here, someone who can argue with vendors and balance the books and tell Doreen no when Doreen needs telling no. Someone the staff actually likes. Caleb. Someone I trust." She was not, she noted with great surprise, breathing. "There is only one person on earth I trust to do this," he said. "I have always known who she was. I have not been able to ask, because she had her city job and her career and her real life. I told myself I would not ask. I told myself I would find somebody else." "Did you?" "No. I have not, in 2 years, even tried." The tears came. She had not given them permission. They came anyway. They came quietly, the way her tears had always come, with no warning and no sound, and one slid down the side of her nose before she could catch it. "It would be a real job," he said. "Full salary. Full benefits. You report to me on paper. You are my boss in practice. Walter is afraid of you already. Doreen will fight you on the menus. You will like that part. I will like that part. Will you take it?" She was crying and she was laughing, and she did not know how either of those things had happened. "Yes," she said. "Say it again." "Yes, Caleb." He brought her hand up. He did not kiss it. He did not that night do anything he could not take back. He just pressed the back of her hand against the side of his jaw, against the small place under his ear where the cologne had been, and he held it there. He held it there for a long time. She did not ask him to let go. He did not let go. The inn went on, settling around them, the way old buildings settle, the way nights end. The sea, very far off, kept its slow, ordinary count. Doreen said it the way Doreen said everything, plainly while doing 6 other things, with no apparent understanding that the words were about to land in the room like a dropped pan. She was up to her elbows in pie dough. By the way what? My cousin's husband works the front gate at the marina. He said some city fella came through there yesterday asking after Ellie. Tall man, slick, said he was going to surprise her. Personally, I don't like the word surprise in a man's mouth, but that's me. Caleb had been leaning against the kitchen doorway with a clipboard. He stopped leaning. Who? Some old boyfriend of hers by the sound of him. Said her people would tell her he was coming to bring her home. As if she wasn't home. His words, not mine. When? Sunday, maybe Monday. He didn't say. He was busy being important at the dock attendant. Pass me that bowl. Caleb did not pass the bowl. Caleb set the clipboard down on the kitchen counter with the kind of careful flatness that meant the clipboard would have been thrown if his grandmother had not raised him better than to throw things in a kitchen. He walked out the swinging door without another word. Doreen looked at the door. Doreen looked at the pie dough. Lord, she said. He went up the side stairs 2 at a time. She found Ellie in the suite. She was on the floor of the living room in front of the coffee table, sorting through a small box of old photographs his grandmother had given her. She had her hair tucked behind one ear and an open photo album across her knees, and a small, foolish smile on her face from looking at a picture of him at age 9 on the dock, holding a fish that was about half his own size and twice his own dignity. She looked up. The smile slid. She had never seen his face like that. "Caleb, tell me about Trevor." She closed the photo album, carefully. "What about Trevor? He is apparently coming to bring you home." "Who told you that?" "My kitchen, Ellie. My village. He used to do this. He used to threaten to come get me every time we fought. He never showed up once, not once. He's a man who likes the sound of his own voice making promises he doesn't keep. And if he keeps this one, he won't. And if he does..." She stood up off the floor. She set the photo album on the coffee table. She walked over to him, and she set her hands flat on the front of his shirt very lightly, the way you would touch a horse that was about to bolt. "Caleb, look at me." He looked at her. He looked at her hard. "If he steps onto this property," he said, and his voice was very even, "he will find a polite but extremely firm conversation waiting for him at approximately the height of his chin. He will be invited to leave first. He will not, however, leave first. I know the type. So we will have the conversation, and he will not enjoy it." She looked up at him. She felt something in the middle of her chest do a slow, soft turn. It was not, she realized with a kind of distant amusement, fear of what he was capable of. It was the opposite. It was the absolutely ridiculous, absolutely undignified recognition that watching a man this protective of her was a thing she had not known her own body would react to. She lifted one hand. She set it against his jaw. The line under her palm was very set. She started against every better instinct to laugh. "Caleb Whitmore, do not laugh. You're jealous. I am protective. You are jealous, Cal. You are jealous, and it is a little bit adorable, and I..." He kissed her. It happened all at once. He took 2 steps. He set his hands at her face. He bent down to her, and he kissed her with the weight of every restrained thing the last 28 days had been quietly carrying, and the laugh she had been about to make went somewhere small and quiet in the back of her throat and stayed there. The room around them did the small, impossible thing. It went still. The shells on the porch chime stopped. The sea outside the open balcony door, which had been making its slow, ordinary count all afternoon, suspended itself. There was only the small, steady pressure of his hands on either side of her face, and the long, careful gravity of a man who had been deciding for weeks not to do this, and had finally decided otherwise. She did not pull away. She came up onto her toes. She set her hands at the back of his neck, and she answered the question he had been carrying in his eyes for a month, with an answer she did not have to translate into words. It was the answer. It was, she understood with a clarity that nearly buckled her knees, the answer to a question she had also been carrying. She had not known until that second that she had been carrying it. He pulled back enough to look at her. His eyes had gone very dark. "Ellie, bug. Don't apologize." "I was not going to apologize." "Good." He kissed her again, softer, slower, like a man taking the long way through a sentence on purpose. The light in the suite had begun to slide toward gold. The afternoon was leaving. The shutter on the second floor below them did its small evening tap. He set his forehead against hers. He did not let her go. "I have been holding this for years," he said quietly. "Years. More than I am going to admit to right now. Tell me later. Later." He picked her up the way he had picked her up at the door on the first day, with one arm under her knees this time and one across her back. She did not protest. She set her cheek against his shoulder. The kitchen door downstairs swung shut. Doreen, somewhere in the deep machinery of the building, decided very loudly that the front desk needed her, immediately, for at least an hour. He didn't let her go, pulling her close against his chest right there on the couch, wrapping his grandmother's old quilt around both of them as the evening deepened. It was the quiet meeting of 2 hearts that had finally found their way back home after years of searching. They stayed like that through the long, peaceful night, talking in whispers and listening to the steady rhythm of the tide. The morning light, when it softly broke through the balcony window, found them side by side, washed in the calm certainty that they would never have to face the world alone again. It had a lot to count that morning. Nana Maggie sat at the sweets kitchen table with a cup of tea she had not touched in 20 minutes, watching Ellie braid her own hair at the small mirror by the door. The braid was not cooperating. The braid had not cooperated all week. Ellie was on her fourth attempt, and the fourth attempt was, by any reasonable measure, identical to the first three. "You are nervous," Nana said. "I am not nervous. You are nervous and your hair knows it. I'm just going for a walk." You are going for a walk with my grandson. I go for walks with him every Tuesday." The old woman lifted her cup. She did not say anything else. Nana Maggie had stopped saying things almost entirely, somewhere around the second month after Caleb and Ellie had begun their long, polite, badly disguised public courtship. She had decided around then that she would do most of her communicating by raising one eyebrow at a time. It was a more efficient system. 5 months had passed since the kitchen and the photo album and the long, quiet morning after. 5 months of Ellie at the front desk with the new title on her name tag. 5 months of small Tuesday walks and Sunday breakfasts and the inn's books in 2 careful sets of handwriting. 5 months of the village adjusting slowly to the truth that everyone in the village had already known. Walter had not commented. Doreen had commented constantly. Sienna Hale had not, mercifully, returned. Trevor had never set foot on the property. Somewhere in the city he had moved on to making promises to other women's voicemail. The sun was sliding low when Caleb came up to fetch her. He had on a clean shirt rolled to the elbows. He had on the soft, easy face he had begun to wear in private. He had his hand in his pocket, and the hand in his pocket was, she did not yet know, holding something he had been carrying for 2 weeks. "Walk," he said. "Walk." Nana Maggie raised very slowly one eyebrow. They went down the side stairs together and out the gate to the beach. The tide was halfway out. The sand was firm under their bare feet, the way it got when the day had taken some of its heat back and given the shore a long, even cool of evening. They walked the line where the water met the sand. The pelicans were doing their last circuit. The sky was the soft hot pink of a peony that had been left in a window all afternoon. He stopped after about 1/4 of a mile. "Look at that," he said, pointing at nothing. "Look at what?" "Right there." She turned to look at nothing, and when she turned back he was down on one knee in the wet sand. She set both her hands over her mouth. He held up a small ring. It was thin. It was plain. It was the kind of ring a woman could wear to do dishes in, the kind of ring that would not catch on the front desk paperwork, the kind of ring that meant he had been paying close attention to the life she actually lived. "Ellie Brooks." "You, Caleb. I have one question. I have been waiting to ask it for, by my count, about 19 years. You are not going to make me cry on this beach. I am going to make you cry on this beach. Will you marry me?" She was already crying. She was also already laughing. She did not know which had started first, and she did not bother to find out. "Yes." "Say it again." "Yes, Caleb. Yes, yes, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. He stood up. He brushed wet sand off his knee. He kissed her with the small, slow, easy smile of a man who had finally said the sentence he had been carrying his whole life. The waves did their slow, ordinary count behind them. A gull, somewhere overhead, made the only remark that mattered. The wedding came 3 weeks later. The whole village set up the tables. The whole village brought a dish. The whole village strung paper lanterns between the palms, low and warm, until the strip of beach below the inn looked like a long string of small, calm moons. Doreen had taken charge of the food and was, when not stirring, weeping into a dish towel. Walter, in a tie nobody had ever seen him in before, was directing traffic with quiet authority and pretending he was not also weeping. Nana Maggie sat in the front row with both hands in her lap. She was crying very quietly. She was not making a sound. She was just letting it happen. Ellie walked the short path through the sand in a simple cream linen dress with the small enamel pin from Doreen on her left shoulder. Her hair was loose to her waist, the way she had always worn it as a girl. Caleb did not look at anybody else for the entire ceremony. Caleb did not, in fact, appear to remember that anybody else was there. They said the small, old words. They said them in front of everyone they had grown up with. The lanterns came on as the sun went down. The party went on until 2 in the morning, the way parties go on in small coastal villages, until everyone had told the bride at least one embarrassing story about the groom, and the groom had been forced to dance with 3 different grandmothers in a row. Caleb did not stop smiling. Ellie did not stop laughing. The bakery owner's daughter, who had married the mechanic, gave a toast that nobody could hear. It did not matter. Everybody clapped anyway. Months later, on a quiet golden afternoon, they were walking that same strip of beach again. Ellie was barefoot. Her hair was up in a soft, loose knot. There was a noticeable round shape under her cotton dress, the careful, settled 6-month curve of a baby who had been kicking that morning, with the polite firmness of a future stubborn person. Caleb had his hand spread flat against her, palm wide. He was grinning at something she had just said. "Don't tell me to stop. I am telling you to stop. It isn't even a name. It is a perfectly reasonable name. It is a fish, Caleb. It is a family fish. I am not naming our child after the fish you caught in 1996. You haven't even let me make the case." "There is no case." She was laughing. He was laughing. He pulled her in against his side with the easy, automatic motion of a man who had finally stopped being careful about touching her at all. He bent down and kissed the top of her head. The sea was at its slow, ordinary count again. A pelican passed over. She rested her hand on top of his, on her stomach. The baby kicked once, hard, exactly under his palm. He laughed at the small, impossible miracle of that, and she laughed at him, laughing, and they kept walking the line where the water met the sand, the way they had walked it as children, the way they would walk it now for the long, ordinary rest of their lives. The light went gold. The light stayed gold. The shore kept its count. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.